Good evening, everyone, and welcome to GCPL's Meet the Author series of programs. Tonight, we're honored to host Tara Teaspoon Bench. I'm Denise Ogier, the Adult Programming Manager for the Gwinnett County Public Library. Again, this evening's moderator is Merwin Chambers, and he is a very beloved person to all of us who work at the library. I have known him for years and years and years, and he has always been on the board of the Friends of the Library, and he is their treasurer. He also is an avid home cook and baker, and he thinks that cookbooks are mysteries to be solved. And he's the only person I have ever met that's good idea of a good time is to sit and read cookbooks. So I give you our moderator for tonight, Mr. Merwin Chambers.
Thank you, Denise. Tara Teaspoon Bench has spent more than 20 years in the food publishing industry, creating recipes and articles and food styling for various magazines, books, television, and advertising. Most recently, she has been food and entertaining director of Ladies' Home Journal magazine. Prior to working for the journal, Tara was food editor at Martha Stewart Living, Kids, and Weddings magazine. She has appeared on Martha Stewart television shows, The Today Show, and on Food Network as a show judge and a contestant. Copies of Tara's book, Live Life Deliciously, Recipes for Busy Weekdays and Leisurely Weekends are available for purchase at Eagle Eye Bookshop. It's a wonderful book. I've enjoyed cooking recipes from it. Thank you for visiting with us tonight, Tara.
Thanks for having me. And I can't wait to hear what you've made from the book, but I am thrilled to be here. Thanks a lot.
If you'd like to go ahead and start, I understand you have a brief presentation for us.
I do. I have a little background on me and a little bit more about the book and why I wrote it. So let me share my screen. And you should be able to see a presentation now. So my book, Live Life Deliciously, as Merwin said, just published this fall. And I am thrilled to have a book in the marketplace and in your homes and in libraries. And it's such a dream and an honor. And so I will tell you a little bit about why I wrote it. I'm like Merwin. I think cookbooks are everyday useful, but they are also so fun to read. And I think they reflect a culture and an era. And I live in a tiny New York apartment, and I am a huge cookbook collector. And so I've got vintage cookbooks from the early 1900s. I have, books from the 70s when fondue was such a craze, and classic standards like The Art of French Cooking. And I love to flip through these cookbooks with no intention of cooking at the moment. So very much like Merwin, I love reading them, and they remind me of another era, and they transport me to another culture or, a far off locale. And to write my own cookbook was so special because I consider myself a culinary educator first, and I want to get the right tools in the hands of cooks. I want to show them that cooking can be a way to build traditions and make memories, and how it's possible and how it really can be enjoyable. So that's a bit about why I think having a book of my own is so special. And you can see some pictures of me as a kid. I have always loved cooking. And so I was lucky enough to cook with my mom growing up. And I spent my childhood cooking with her, and my grandmother's family get-togethers always revolved around a beautifully prepared meal. And so my passion started there. And I took that and created a career out of food. So as Merwin said, I was a food editor at Martha Stewart magazine and her company for many years after I finished culinary school. And there I was able to learn the technique of food styling for photography and recipe development and recipe testing. And so it really honed my skills in sharing tried and true recipes and trends and, culinary expertise And it was a great experience to launch my career in publishing. I love food publishing, and it really started there. I have been able to appear on TV, as Merwin said, done many cooking shows. I love sharing food in that way as well. And several years ago, I started a blog. So tarateaspoon.com is a place where, after I left magazines, both Martha Stewart and Ladies Home Journal, I still wanted a place to share my recipes. And the website is that place. I have new creations. I have my classics that I love from all of my experiences working with brands and magazines. And it's a really exciting way to engage with people. And so that sort of gave me that passion to write the cookbook and continue to share with a different audience. This is producing the cookbook, and I do all of my own food styling. Right there in my New York apartment, I was able to hire an amazing photographer to capture the food and make it look amazing on the pages of the cookbook. For me, sharing recipes is definitely about sight, the look of food. We're all inspired if something looks amazing, but also the sound of the recipes. I named my recipes, burrata with grilled peaches and orange zest chimichurri, to sound good. You can say, oh, here's some delicious pigs in a blanket, and I'll bet they're delicious, but it doesn't sound the same, right, as French bistro mushroom burgers. So that's something that I definitely considered in my book. And I was also able to bring in some sentimental things. Like I said, I've been cooking with my mother and grandmothers my whole life. And at the beginning of each chapter, I share a picture of some kitchen tools, whether it's knives or spoons or, bowls, baking molds, all of those things. And many of them I have collected over the years in my professional career. Some of those spoons are my grandmother's and my mother's, and now I get to use them in my kitchen. And so cooking for me is a very sentimental, wonderful experience. I am, I love teaching people that nothing's hard to find. Things are very approachable and easy to make. In my book, I write a lot of recipes with really exciting flavor combinations, using spices that you might have on hand, using very modern ingredients that I call the new pantry. So hot sauces and capers and, things like sweet chili sauce and fish sauce and limes, all of those things we have in our kitchens now, and we have it accessible at grocery stores. And our pantries are not just salt and pepper and sugar and butter anymore. So I really shared recipes in this book that reflect the way we cook now and the way we like to eat now. So that's really an introduction to my book, my background, and how it happened to come to fruition this fall.
That's really interesting, Tara. One of the things I wondered about when you develop recipes, do you start with an ingredient or a concept, or just maybe you want to do a derivative of something you've seen in another book? How do you get started developing a recipe?
Yes, all of that, Merwin. It's different every time. That's a great question. Sometimes I'm inspired by seeing a picture of food or something placed in front of me at a restaurant. And while I'll think, oh, I'm not going to make that exact thing, something about that visual will inspire me to create a new recipe. And then absolutely, if I start with one ingredient, and that's what I love about the weeknight cooking aspect, is I'm very much someone who will open my fridge and say, what do I have? I've got some leftover rotisserie chicken. I've got this, this, and this. How can I create a recipe out of that? So yes, sometimes I start with an ingredient. Oftentimes in my professional career, I'm working with brands and food companies. And so they will give me an ingredient or give me direction and say, hey, we need 10 healthy recipes for fall, or we need 3 recipes around this ingredient that we're trying to market. So those are fun experiences to create recipes around, because I've got that guideline, and it's a bit of a challenge. But a lot of times, and most of the time in this book, I was just inspired by things I like to make, and I wanted to make them easy and accessible for cooks at home.
Thanks. That's interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about what a food editor for a magazine does?
Oh, yes. I absolutely loved being a food editor. So I think times have changed. Food editors wear a lot of hats. A lot of times they're food editors and they write articles and they create recipes, and they probably manage websites and social media accounts. But for the most part, when I was a food editor, both at Martha Stewart and Ladies Home Journal, my job was to curate the food content in the magazine each month. And so half my job was at the desk and half my job was in a test kitchen. And I was able to we go a year ahead, sometimes 6 months, and say, okay, let's work on the August issue. And so my job would be to say, hey, what are the trends that we want to share with our readers? What are seasonal recipes, tips, expertise, things like that. And so we would create stories and develop the recipes. We would go down in the test kitchen, create recipes, and then the next step is to have them shot on a photo shoot. So a professional photographer and a food stylist and the whole team would make these food pictures look amazing. Then I would write the copy that goes with that in the magazine, and it gets published. So that was the basic process of being a food editor at a magazine.
Is the food we're seeing in those pictures real food, or is it sometimes carvings from butter that are then spray painted? Or
Good question. So I will tell you, in magazines, you're pretty guaranteed that the food is 100% food and usually almost always edible. So magazines tend to style real food because they want readers to be able to replicate exactly what they made. Now, when you get into advertising food styling, that's where you get into that fake food, and we use glue for milk and Crisco for ice cream. It's true. And it's because with advertising, they're going for a completely different look, and it's going to a completely different audience. And nobody's really going to recreate that McDonald's burger at home. So they just want it to look as luscious as it can. And usually it has to sit in front of big photo lights for a long time. And so the food is often cold, it's not even hot, and you use tricks like Vaseline and spray to make it look hot and glistening. And so some of those food styling tricks are definitely used in editorial and magazine food styling, but for the most part, my career is based off of being able to eat everything after we take a picture of it.
That's interesting. We do have a question from the participants here. First of all, they say they love your website.
Thanks.
And you had talked in the website, I guess, about working for Ladies Home Journal, and you refer to the 7 sisters of women's magazines. And this participant's wondering what those 7 sisters are.
Oh, I knew that question was coming. Let's see if I can remember them. If I get out a few, you'll know what I mean. So Ladies Home Journal, let's see, it was published almost 150 years ago. So about 145 years ago, Ladies Home Journal started. And soon after that, Better Homes and Gardens and Good Housekeeping was around. And so, this was a long time ago, before, in the 1800s, when these women's magazines were just starting to enter people's homes and share these common tips and talk about things and share recipes. And so suddenly these magazines brought insight into people's homes. Before, it was just information passed down from your mother or your grandmother or your neighbor. And now you had these experts telling you what was in the grocery store, what you should try to make, what was the right way to entertain, and which fork to use. And all of these women's service magazines started to be written and published. And so about in the 1900s, there were about 7 magazines that they called the Seven Sisters. And it was Better Homes and Gardens, Good Housekeeping, Ladies Home Journal, Red Book. There's McCall's, I think, was one. And I'm missing 2. Women's Day, I can't remember if it was Women's Day or, anyway, you get the gist. They were these women's service magazines. And those were the main ones. And they called them the Seven Sisters because they were focused on women and home and lifestyle. And over the years, they changed titles and started to be sold off and closed. And there's very few of them left. But I loved working at Ladies Home Journal because of that legacy, because it was about entering people's homes and helping them to create and be homemakers. It was amazing.
Wasn't Ladies Home Journal one of the leaders when the safe food movement first started? Before, as a result of the FDA being created and food being so adulterated?
Ladies Home Journal, they have such a legacy. They were very involved in a lot of movements, and it wasn't just recipes and tips for the house. They would definitely cover politics and what was going on and what affected you in your homes. And so they definitely covered that and were a big part of reporting on things and issues like that.
That's interesting. We have another question from the participants. They say they really admire Martha Stewart and think that she's a business genius, and they're wondering what it was like to work for her.
I love that. And I agree. She is business savvy. And that is often what I tell people that I really appreciated about working there, is learning and watching her create this company and her business expertise, not only her talent in so many areas and her talent in being able to share that, but she is a very smart businesswoman. So I started at Martha Stewart before her company went public. So it was really interesting to see that transition and see the business behind that. But when I first started working there, we were all Martha's personal employees because the company wasn't public. And so we would be treated as her, personal employees, not just for Martha Stewart Omnimedia. So I would be asked to go to her home and cater dinners for her on the weekends. And we were asked to, make her special meals and things like that, because as food editors, we were her personal food editors, as well as create the magazine. And several years after I started, we had the IPO and the company went public, and a lot of the business changed. We were much more removed from her personal day-to-day, but we watched how savvy she was at maneuvering that company growth. And when I started, there were just over 100 employees. And by the time I left, there were 600 employees. So she really did grow into, products and, partnerships and things like that with her brand. So I agree. Yes, she was. And it was a really great experience to see how that all came together.
One of the participants online has a question also. They'd like to know what you see as the future for food magazines, and is there a future?
That is such a good question. Every few years I see magazines that close, like Ladies Home Journal, and many close every few years. And I think, this is it. That, they're going to go extinct. And then new ones will crop up, and new talent, new interests. And I watch Magnolia, the Pioneer Woman, all of those magazines start and be very successful. And so I've had to ask myself that same question often, is what is the future? And I think right now it's it's already combining publishing with an online experience. And so all the new magazines coming really have a very strong online presence, as well as that in your hand reading experience. And I think that's the key. I think that's for any new publication coming out in the next several years, they will have to have both and meld it together very well. And I think many have, a lot of the magazines that are still surviving have done that well. I think there's definitely room for improvement as magazines sort of wane. An interesting thing is when I was in the industry more closely working with other editors, there was definitely talk about Good Housekeeping. How is that staying alive and not Ladies' Home Journal? They're very similar audiences, and Good Housekeeping has created the Good Housekeeping Institute, and they are experts at testing and approving products of all kinds. And that's what's keeping them afloat, that is still very well respected, that Good Housekeeping Institute, and it's sort of carrying the magazine. So we would lose publications like that unless they broaden and work in different aspects of business.
One viewer tonight would like to know, with all the food you're around all the time, how do you manage to stay thin?
Well, you're only seeing my top half, so my hips don't show my hips show the truth. No, I am around food a lot, but cooking for a living, I'm on my feet a lot, and I'm grocery shopping, and I'm schlepping bags, and I'm busy cooking, and I think that's helped maintain a little bit of balance. But I do like a variety of things, so I don't always eat restaurant heavy food. I'm cooking as if you were cooking at home, and I'll mix it up. I'll have something light if I eat something heavy the day before. And that's how I meal plan. And there are times when I'm on a photo shoot that's 3 days long and it's all baking, or, I'm developing a lot of recipes for a client and it's just so much food. And I get to a point where I've tasted too much, can't do it anymore. I'll go out for a slice of pizza. But it's just all balance. It really is. And there's always weight gain, but I know how to cook healthy and delicious, so that helps.
Yes, it helps all of us. If we were to sneak in and take a peek in your refrigerator right now, what would we find?
Good question. Luckily, I just cleaned it out, so it's nice and clean. I wouldn't be embarrassed for you to look in there. But I would say I have a lot of what I call new pantry staples, but they live in my fridge. I have a lot of base flavors. So my door of my fridge is the most populated. It's got my tahini and my red curry paste and my sweet chili sauce and my sesame oil and my tamari and my soy sauce, all of these things that help me build flavor for meals. So that's probably mostly what you'll find. You will also find a lot of cut up vegetables, because I will go to the store and I'll buy lots of salad and vegetables, and then I won't eat it unless I prep it and clean it and cut it and put it in the fridge. So that's also what you'll see among a lot of leftovers from developing recipes.
That sounds like a good tip. Prep it as soon as you bring it home. For someone who's listening and is starting out new as a cook, what do you think are the most essential kitchen tools for a home cook?
Thanks for asking that, Merwin. I actually have an entire chapter, and I debated putting this chapter in my book because I think a lot of cookbooks have it. My cookbook is not a 101 or joy of cooking. It's not like everything you need to know. It is about inspirational recipes and flavor and, getting out of your rut cooking.
Mhm.
But I did include an equipment chapter because I'm so passionate about this. And one of my biggest tips is I always tell a new cook or an old cook, it doesn't matter, to have a good chef's knife and keep it sharp and build on your knife collection. So knives to me, and nice quality sharp knives, are one of my favorite tools. And I find that if you have those in your kitchen, you take care of them, they will make cooking more fun. It's no fun to cook with a dull paring knife and that's all you have in the kitchen, or an old serrated knife that does nothing, it squishes your bread, things like that. You want to focus on those. I swear it will change your life in the kitchen. And then other things, one of my other tips, I think food processors are very overlooked. We all have blenders. We all might have a hand mixer or a stand mixer. We have a toaster. We have a toaster oven. We have so many small appliances in our kitchens. And I think so often people look at food processors and say, oh, I'm not going to invest in that yet, or it's a little too expensive, I'm not going to get one. And it's one of my favorite small appliances, and you can get them very affordably now. So I always suggest get a food processor, find a corner, find the bottom of a cupboard for it. It's just as big as a toaster, but you will use it so much.
That's interesting. I love my processor.
Yes.
We have a viewer online who is wondering what's next in your career. Might we see a restaurant or a chain of restaurants?
Oh, wow. I went to culinary school and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to be a chef or work in a restaurant or be a caterer. And I think I will always feel that way. To own a restaurant and to be a chef, you are always working when people are playing. People are going out to eat in the evening and you're working. And I don't want that lifestyle. However, I am so passionate about it. I love cooking for people. I love entertaining. But I think that lifestyle is what deters me from saying, I'll open a bakery or a restaurant. So no, that's not in my future. I think right now I am learning how to be a cookbook author. I have been an editor, I have been a blogger, I've been a TV personality, and I've never been a cookbook author. So I'm going to sit on that for a while. I'm going to grow my website and make it a really wonderful food destination. And so right now, that's my future.
You were a contestant on, I believe, one of the first seasons of the Christmas cookie contest. What was it like being on a show like that?
Oh, goodness. Good question.
It was also asked by
Many
a
years
viewer.
ago, I had been a judge on a Food Network show. When I was an editor, they asked me to come and be a judge on a Food Network Thanksgiving show. And it was my first experience with reality cooking TV. And so I knew enough about it that I knew sort of how being a contestant might play out. So years later, I was asked to be a contestant, like you said, on a Food Network Christmas cookie show. And I said no, because I was like, I don't want to do reality cooking TV. I knew the producers are always, pushing drama and they're trying to get people worked up. And it's hard, but it's so entertaining. So they asked me 3 times. Finally, I said, okay, I'll try it. So it was fun and also hard, and I would never do it again. I think I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I think food styling makes me that way. I like my food to look pretty. And on those shows, you never have enough time to make everything, make it look the way you want, have it turn out. And that's part of it, is they create that drama, right? Because somebody's about to fail, their cookie's burned, or, something's not done yet. And it really is like that. And I don't like cooking that way. I like to have a plan. I don't like things sprung on me. So it was a fun experience, but you won't see me on a reality cooking show again.
When they plan a show like that and they have the contestants, do they have the contestants supply them with a list? Do they review the recipes beforehand to make sure they've got everything on hand for the contestants?
Yes, and to make sure I'm not breaking any contracts I signed, I'll be brief on this, but yes, they do, and I can talk about that. I went through a series of 5 different interviews, and then so that prepped me for sort of, they'll tell you about, they prep you for what it might be like. And then they tell you, they say, practice up on your favorite recipes. You know, I knew I was going into a cookie competition. So I put together my tried and true recipes and had in my mind some options of how to change things up or make them exciting if I was, asked to do something crazy. And so they let you bring a little notebook of recipes, so you don't have to have them memorized, and you kind of keep it under the cupboard. So, but then you don't know what the challenge is going to be. You don't know if you have to make a 3-dimensional cookie or, a cookie with some special nut in it. So all of these challenges they give you, you really only find out a few hours before. And so it's tricky. They supply the kitchen that you're in with a lot of different ingredients, but in the middle of the competition, I had something in mind and we didn't have that ingredient. And so I had to improvise. And I think that's part of it, is they interviewed me and made sure I know how to improvise. I know how to switch things up last minute. And that's, something they like to have on the show.
Do the judges have off-camera interaction with the contestants?
No, we're kept very separate, and for good reason. The funny thing is my show, we walked in, we didn't know who the judges were. We walked in to meet the judges and all these cameras were on us. It was live. And I realized one of the judges was Ree Drummond, the Pioneer Woman. And I know her, I've worked with her, I know her well, we're friends. And so we both looked at each other and we were like, hi. But we couldn't, act like we knew each other. But she was unbiased, and it was great. But yeah.
When you're a judge on those programs, if you have, say, a food allergy, is that communicated to the contestants?
No. I think if you were a judge, I think they would, if you had a very strong food allergy and the producers know you couldn't taste certain foods, they'd keep you away from that or make sure that competition didn't include those. But yeah, when I was a judge, I don't eat shellfish, and it was a Thanksgiving challenge. So everyone thought we're fine. There's no shellfish. I mean, maybe a oyster in a stuffing, but that's, I can avoid that bite. But somebody did shrimp and grits because they were from the South. So I ate the grits, but I didn't eat the shellfish.
We have a viewer tonight who's wondering if you would ever consider hosting your own cooking show on Food Network or something like that.
Yes and no. I think if the opportunity presented itself, I would figure out all the details before I jumped in with both feet. I've done enough TV, and I'll tell you, this year with our pandemic, I've done a lot more TV virtually, and because everyone's looking for virtual content and cooking segments and shows, and it's a lot of work. I have to prepare the content, I have to cook it, I have to set the setup and the cameras and, get camera ready and all of these details about being on a cooking show or a cooking segment. And so if the right opportunity came along, I think it would be a lot of fun. But right now it's something that I do every once in a while, and I'd rather focus on sharing recipes on my blog where people can go and search them constantly.
One of the viewers tonight is wondering, have you picked a subject for your next book?
Yes, I kind of have. Exciting enough, I signed a 2-book deal. So I don't have to keep that secret, but I can't tell you exactly what the next book's going to be about. I will say my passion is sharing recipes and food that help you gather people together in the kitchen and gather people together to share that moment. And I talked a little bit about that at the beginning. And so I think the next book will probably have a little bit more of that feel in it.
For those of us who enjoy entertaining and cooking for other people, and maybe sometimes we overreach a little bit, do you have do you have a couple of tips that are lifesavers for the home cook, the home and who's entertaining?
For entertaining, I do have a few that I can just have off the top of my head. I think I definitely talk about this in the book. I say plan ahead. So definitely you plan your menu. We're all sort of accustomed to that. You get your groceries shopped for. The one tip is prepare your ingredients ahead of time. So in French classic cooking, it's called mise en place. It's getting everything staged and ready for your recipe. And when you're entertaining, that's imperative. You can do that on a bigger extent, not just one recipe. You can prepare your ingredients, put them in different bowls or Tupperware in the fridge, have a section of your kitchen with some trays that have everything out so you're not searching for an ingredient or you run out of something. I think that's one of my favorite tips for entertaining is planning, preparing, and then you move into that stage of actually cooking and bringing people in and entertaining them. One of my other tips I would say that I love is pulling out your serving dishes and your serveware before you start cooking. Pull out that big platter or the bowl and say, okay, this is what the rice is going to go in, and this is what my turkey is going to go on, or this is what my roast or skewers are going to be in. So having that ready, then you're not scrambling for a bowl and your pasta doesn't fit in it or something like that. I think that's just, throw a Post-it note in it, lay them out on your table, say this is for, the tomatoes and this is for the stuffing, and have all of your serving pieces out before you start preparing your meal.
That's a great tip. Do you disclose the menu to your guests beforehand, or do you keep it secret just in case something doesn't work out?
That's a good question. Well, here's another thought is, and I'm posing a question to everyone. When you entertain, are you trying all new recipes, or have you tried them before and you're comfortable with them? So I think you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're like, hey, I'm going to throw a bunch of new recipes in the mix tonight, and you're setting yourself up for, maybe some trouble. But I would say try recipes a few weeks before. See what you like, see how they go together, and create your menu that way. But I'm all about telling people what food there is. So many people love to bring a bottle of wine or a hostess gift, and they kind of will know what goes with the meal if you share that with them. But it's not a rule. You don't have to disclose what you're serving.
We do have another question from the viewers tonight. It's a two-part question. What's the last cookbook you bought? And most of the people watching this tonight are readers and avid readers. They're also wondering what you're reading currently that's not a cookbook.
Oh, good question. Gosh, I haven't picked up a novel or something for months and months. So I am not reading anything right now. My spare time is usually preparing for more cookbook appearances for my book tour right now, or listening to SEO webinars to learn how to do search engine optimization for my website. So I'm boring in that sense, but I do love cookbooks, and I do love, so many cookbooks come out in the spring and in the fall. So mine was among a slew of amazing cookbooks. And one of the people that endorsed my cookbook is my old boss, Susan Spungen. And she's an amazing cook. She was the food director at Martha Stewart Living. She was the founding food editor at Martha Stewart Living. And she came out with a book this spring that I bought. It is, let me get it right. It's Open Kitchen. It's inspired food for casual gatherings. So that book and one other are my most recent purchases. And the other one is called Half-Baked Harvest by Tegan Gerard. And she is a food influencer online and has a few cookbooks. And her newest cookbook is the one I most recently got. So I love thumbing through new books. I get inspired by them, but I think like all of you, just love reading them. It's almost like going out to eat. You just enjoy that meal. Somebody else prepared it for you. And I love that thumbing through a cookbook, I'm like, somebody else created this and now I just get to enjoy it.
There's a lot of cultural variation in your latest cookbook. I think there are some Southwest influences, some Thai influences. The recipe for Swedish meatballs with noodles and cranberry chutney, so maybe some Scandinavian influences. Do you have a particular cuisine you're studying deeply right now?
Never anything particular. Like my cookbook, I love to dabble in all of them. I don't necessarily deep dive unless I'm focusing on some new technique. But right now, no, I love eating a variety. I love cooking a variety. And by no means do I call myself expert in cooking Thai food or, Italian food. However, I love to make those flavors and those concepts and traditions very accessible for people. So yes, in my cookbook, I have a few Moroccan recipes and one for chermoula sauce. And that sounds so exotic. And oh my gosh, I can't make that at home. That's something I'd go to, a Moroccan restaurant for. But I wanted to make it accessible. It's a mix of spices and herbs, and it's so good with vegetables and chicken and rice. And so that's sort of the idea behind my jumping into globally inspired recipes like that.
That's interesting. It's nice to see a lot of different influences, and you manage to blend them together in the recipes in the book. One of the recipes that I thought was inspired is, who doesn't enjoy butter on a good piece of artisan bread? And your suggestion for a butter board, what was the genesis of that?
Oh, thanks for asking. It's one of my favorite recipes, and it's in the first chapter. It's in the appetizer chapter. And it was really inspired by the trend of all of these snack boards and cheese boards. And they're just so luscious and so beautiful. And even to create a beautiful cheese board is sometimes hard. You have to know what cheeses to buy and how to pair them all together and what charcuterie to put with them. And I realized as I was creating recipes, because I do have two snack boards in the book. I have a Mexican inspired snack board and an Italian style snack board. And I thought, sometimes I just love to have a crusty baguette with butter smeared on it. But how can I elevate that? How can I make that special enough to entertain with? And so that's where the butter board came in. And I'll show you a picture right here. It's all different compound butters or flavored butters. And typically compound butters are used, melted onto steak or stirred into a soup, but you can eat them. You can spread them on bread and toast and crackers. And so I thought, why not serve several flavored butters just like I would serve several different cheeses? So that's where it came from.
That will definitely be included in my next dinner party.
It's so fun.
I think it's just inspired.
Thank you. Thanks.
In your cooking career, what's your most embarrassing moment?
Do I have a most embarrassing moment? I probably block it out of my mind. So I don't know if I remember. I do that. If it's too embarrassing, I don't even remember it.
I think we all do that.
Yeah. There was a scary moment though. There was one time so many years ago, I was the lead food stylist on a photo shoot at Martha Stewart. And the photo shoot was for some recipes that I developed. And it was a great photo shoot. I had created a homemade recipe for peeps, marshmallow peeps. And we were shooting them that day. And I had prepared the day before and made all of the ingredients. And the day of the shoot, we have, rented a studio and have a professional photographer and everyone. I slept in. I slept right through my alarm. I slept in and I woke up right when I was supposed to be at the photo shoot. So that was the most fearful moment of my career, I think, is having to throw myself together, get downtown to the studio in New York City, and start the shoot late. Don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone. We'll keep it to ourselves, just
Yeah.
this close group. If this is probably a standard question, I've heard lots of cookbook writers ask this. If you could cook for anybody, dead or alive, who would you like to cook for?
I know I'm probably supposed to say some amazing celebrity, but I think I would be a bit too intimidated. I would actually want to cook for both my grandmothers who are passed on. I would love to sit down at a table with them and have prepared them a meal of things that I love and things that I've made that I was inspired to make because of them. My cooking background comes from both of them. They were both amazing homemakers and cooks. And so I'd love to share that moment with them because they weren't able to experience my career and what I took from them.
That's a very interesting answer. I don't think I've ever heard that before. Because most people will pick celebrities, and
Right. And I would love to have a dinner with many celebrities, but I think the most special would be them.
yeah, I think a lot of us were influenced by our grandmother's cookings. That's interesting. With you said you cooked with your mother. You grew up cooking. Do you have a favorite memory?
You know, I think there are a lot of favorites. I did grow up cooking with my mom. And in fact, I also grew up cooking in an easy bake oven. I loved it. I was the girl in the kitchen with that light bulb cooking my food in that easy bake oven. But I soon graduated to the real oven, and my mom was so great. She would always give me opportunities to try to cook and to help her with things. She'd give me small tasks in the kitchen. But favorite memories are probably, spattering of helping her make weeknight meals. I'd finish my homework or being with her in the kitchen and her saying, here, saute these onions and we'll make some spaghetti, or, helping her and just being there on a Tuesday night as she prepared a meal for our family. And then definitely, and we're in the holidays right now, but definitely holiday cooking. It was always so fun to bake cookies with her at the holidays. When we were little, we would dip chocolates. She just made cooking and being in the kitchen fun.
Would you recommend that's the way we all teach our children and grandchildren? Just get them in the kitchen with us?
I think there are lots of ways. And I think nowadays there's a lot of demands on our time, and perhaps it's a different time than when my mom was able to spend those moments with me. However, I will always say cooking with your children and teaching them, let alone having them in the kitchen with you, takes about twice as long to make a meal or a recipe. It really does. And I just encourage you to take those moments. It doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be every time you cook and they want to be with you. But, have that in mind that, yes, this is going to take twice as long because I'm giving this child an opportunity to investigate new skills and learn about this life skill. It's really a life skill. And you're teaching them other life skills. And so it's really finding time to help young people learn those things.
Well, Tara, I'd like to thank you, first of all, for writing this cookbook. It's fantastic.
Thanks.
And I'd also like to thank you for being with us tonight. I hope everyone who is participating and enjoyed and learned from your years of experience. And it's just been fantastic getting to know you. I did go back and find your cookie cooking challenge and watch that. It was a fun watch. But thank you so much for being with us. And Denise will close out the meeting now.
Thank you, Merwin. It was a delight to talk to you, and thanks everyone for your questions.
Thank you.
Well, it's a lovely note to end on. Your talk about teaching our children to cook or cooking together as families, especially now, Tara, when these are such strange times and we are closer together than ever. So what a great time to to do that with family. Thank you for that. That was a lovely, lovely sentiment. And thank you, Merwin, for being with us this evening. And Tara, thank you so much for taking time with us. And please come to Gwinnett and be with us live when that new book comes out, because we're excited.
Thanks. And we won't have a pandemic, hopefully, at that time. That would be a blast. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.